I saw this video of what I think is an Australian construction worker turning himself blue, and the dad joker in me immediately went to, haha, this is how the Blue Man Group was formed. And then I was like, oh god, that's a reference. Are those guys even still around? If you're like me, you'll be happy to know that they're doing quite well with world tours and permanent shows in Germany and the US. They were so successful, in fact, that the Blue Men were even acquired by Cirque du Soleil in 2017. But don't worry, they weren't sold into slavery, it's nothing like that. It was just a boring corporate acquisition. And it appears that both companies survived the pandemic and their shows have reopened, although they did have to file for bankruptcy in 2020. But yeah, forget about all that. In my quest for more information, I stumbled across this video. I don't know how it happened, but apparently I missed out on one of the biggest news stories of 2008. This man, Paul Karason, who turned himself blue. I have to admit that I was seeing red at the fact that I had missed out on the story. I was tickled pink though by what I was watching, and I thought that its discovery provided me with a golden opportunity for a video, because in going down this particular rabbit hole, I found that the story of this man turning blue was anything but black and white. Look, I'm sorry, I had to. Okay? Forgive me. Anyway, Blue Man, what's going on? How did it happen? Let's start with the easiest and obvious. Cosmetics or painting yourself like the Blue Man Group does.
I'm afraid I just blew myself.
Then there's the decidedly more difficult tattooing. Quite a few people have tattooed their bodies blue. Recently, there was a Canadian forklift operator who tattooed his whole body because he was depressed and lacked confidence. Talk about showing your true colors. I will never stop. And honorable mention to Amber Luke of Australia, who isn't trying to tattoo herself blue per se, but she did tattoo her eyeballs, so she makes it onto my list. Say what you will, that is one way to stand out in a crowded OnlyFans market. But yeah, Paul Karason, aka Papa Smurf, didn't turn himself blue by just painting himself or tattooing himself. He's got some kind of condition. Let's look at what can turn you blue from the inside out. It normally means that your blood is deoxygenated, and this discoloration is called cyanosis. You've probably heard the term cyanotic screamed a few times on medical dramas.
Boy IVs, 15 liters O2s, BPs, AO, 50, 56, G6, cyanotic.
There are also some extremely rare conditions that can turn you blue. Methemoglobinemia, thankfully shortened to MetHB, for example, is a blood disorder that causes an overproduction of a protein, and the presence of this protein turns blood cells a dark, apparently chocolate brown, delicious. MetHB can be caused by a very rare genetic disorder or through exposure to chemicals. If enough of the cells are affected, the whole body will appear blue. In the 1820s, almost all the members of the Fugate family in the hills of Kentucky were a light blue. These guys came to be known as the Blue Fugates, for obvious reasons. Blueness in the family remains something of a mystery still today, but testing of descendants suggests that MetHB is the cause, and it's widely believed that its prevalence among the members of the clan was the result of inbreeding. But MetHB is not only caused by inbreeding, so don't go teasing anyone, not that you guys would. People with the condition might just have lost the genetic lottery, or they may have been exposed to substances that change their body chemistry. And these substances aren't exotic chemicals either. There's an anesthetic called benzocaine, for example, present in many over-the-counter cough drops and syrups that can cause MetHB in high doses. While mild cases of MetHB might go completely unnoticed and undiagnosed, the condition does impede oxygen transportation, and severe cases can be debilitating or even fatal. But yeah, as Paul Karason is extremely blue but otherwise appears active and healthy, he probably isn't starved of oxygen, so something else is at work here. Let's get to it. Drum roll, please. Paul Karason turned blue because he accidentally poisoned himself with silver. Silver poisoning, also known as Argyria, is divided into localized and generalized categories. The localized version is often associated with open wounds, like getting silver solution sprayed into them, possibly as part of a treatment. While the generalized version is frequently caused by long-term exposure to an ingestion or inhalation of silver particles. It is theorized that as little as 1 gram total of silver in the body can cause noticeable generalized Argyria, and yet it remains incredibly rare. Why, I asked myself. Well, it comes down to the chemistry. Now, fair warning, I failed chemistry, and I mean horribly. I'm definitely more of a Jesse than a Walter. But from what I gather, silver is not a particularly reactive substance and the body doesn't use it. Most of the silver that anyone is going to be exposed to will pass harmlessly through them with little to no effect. But when exposed to silver in, say, water, every so often silver ions will enter the bloodstream where they will react with the goo inside you and form silver salts. In addition, some of the silver that is swallowed will react with the acid in the stomach, and again, silver salts can be formed. These silver salts will then bounce around the bloodstream. Many will be filtered, but some will be exposed to light through the skin. Now, silver salts are highly reactive to sunlight, which is why they are used in old-timey black and white photography. When hit by sunlight, they break apart and new compounds are formed, many of which are black or gray. A very similar thing happens to the silver salts in the human bloodstream. Many of the new black and gray particles are then deposited around the body, changing the color of the tissue wherever they are present. This includes internal organs, gums, eyeballs, and, as you can see, the skin. The lighter the skin tone, the more noticeable the change, and the parts of the body most exposed to sunlight will often turn the darkest gray or blue. My understanding is that this cannot happen overnight. It requires months or even years of continuous, relatively high doses to reach the threshold for Argyria to become noticeable. While some people presenting with Argyria have suffered kidney and brain damage, in most cases it is simply a cosmetic change, albeit a permanent one, and one that can have social and psychological ramifications.
Treated differently because you're blue?
Oftentimes. Some of the people were less than polite.
Many cases of Argyria are related to industry, mining, and that old school photography. But there is another surprising and more common route, and that's the one Karson took. The man drank about 10 ounces of a homemade remedy called colloidal silver every day for 20 years, and he even started routinely rubbing the stuff on his skin.
What?
Well, it all started in the 80s when Karson was paging through what he described as a New Age magazine and saw an ad featuring a dried daisy being brought back to life after being placed in colloidal silver. I wish I could find an example of the ad. I don't know how, but it convinced him to immediately order his own colloidal silver DIY kit. Trying it out and suffering no ill effects, he continued using it, let's say casually, for a few years. I couldn't find out much about Karson beyond the few interviews he gave, but there are many hints in those interviews that suggest he mistrusted doctors. So when he developed acid reflux and debilitating arthritis, instead of seeking medical help, he turned to his trusty home remedy, colloidal silver. From all that I've seen and read, it doesn't seem like he was aware of the possibility that this miracle cure might turn him blue. And so he drank the stuff in increasingly large quantities, eventually settling on that glass a day, and by his own account, his symptoms disappeared. At this point, he was completely convinced, and hoping to avoid a return of the pain and discomfort, he continued this daily, relatively large intake for decades, and even started rubbing the stuff on his skin. And as a result, his pinky white complexion that you see here turned gray and then blue. Karson, a self-described loner, didn't notice the gradual change in his complexion, and the few people he interacted with didn't mention anything or didn't notice it either. It was only when an old friend came to visit and on seeing Karson said something like, "Why so blue?" that Karson became aware of his changed complexion. Now, where most people might have been devastated, Karson apparently shrugged it off and kept on chugging his silver concoction, possibly afraid that his pain would return. And this continued exposure to silver made his case of Argyria one of the most extreme on record, and also made him internet famous. Here's my favorite clip of the entire story. It's the original video that sent me down the rabbit hole. 2008, Paul Karason is showing how he makes colloidal silver, and he hands a glass to his then partner, and as you can see, she is totally chilled and is not worried about turning blue at all. Fun fact about the couple, they met over the phone, remember 2008, and he didn't reveal initially that he was blue-skinned, and she fell in love with him, and then only afterwards did she find out that he was blue, but by then, too late, the heart ones with the heart ones. And yeah, we'll never know what was said in those conversations, but I think we can safely assume that Paul Karason has a silver tongue.
Boo this man!
So, I had never heard of colloidal silver before discovering Paul Karason's story, but it seems hella popular. There are hundreds of different products and dozens of different companies, and thousands upon thousands of people have written reviews on Amazon claiming it has cured minor things like bad breath, major things like cancer, and everything in between. Why would you put this on the internet? But what exactly is this stuff? And is it the miracle cure these people believe it to be? Now, we're going to have to jump back into some chemistry, but here's the main idea. Take 2 pieces of silver, attach them to electricity, and microscopic particles will break away from the silver bars. It's called electrolysis. These particles will then kind of just float in the water, and voila, you have colloidal silver. The silver doesn't dissolve, it just kind of hangs there, ready and waiting for whatever comes next. Colloidal silver users rub it onto their skin, they snort it, or they drink it, all with the objective of treating a particular disease or simply boosting their immune systems. The main idea here seems to be that the silver ions present in the colloid will destroy bacteria and viruses, and the positive charge of the ions will somehow energize your immune system. Silver as an element does in fact have proven antimicrobial powers and is currently used to prevent and fight infections in wounds and burns. The key, it seems, is those silver ions I mentioned previously, because when they come into contact with things like bacteria and viruses, they wreck the internal processes of these little bugs, killing them while doing little to no damage to human cells, apparently at least. Exactly how this works is unclear, but it does happen, and because of it, there is a lot of interest in creating self-sterilizing materials made from or coated in silver. And I also stumbled across a few research papers looking at the use of things called silver nanoparticles as a means of overcoming the major challenge to silver's medicinal use, delivering an adequate dose to where it is needed. As I mentioned, silver ions tend to react with the goo inside you, and therefore lose their ability to kill microbes long before coming into contact with them. These extremely small particles of silver, though, might overcome this challenge, hence the interest in them. Colloidal silver advocates and peddlers seem to heavily rely on the ongoing research and use the related terminology to give their products a veneer of legitimacy. What they leave out, though, is that almost every currently proven use of silver is topical, and in many cases, silver just isn't as effective as other treatments. There is very little evidence to suggest that anything marketed as colloidal silver actually overcomes any of these challenges, and in addition, most of the leading brands sell products with minute concentrations of silver. 10 parts per million is, in general terms, purer than most bottled waters, certainly purer than tap water. And even in higher concentrations, using the recommended dosage, it is unlikely you'll ever get enough silver to receive its benefits, real or imagined. Even if applied directly to a point of infection, I'm looking at you, Madison. On the plus side, you'll receive a little boost in hydration, albeit at an incredible markup. And if you buy rather than make your own colloidal silver, at the available concentrations and doses, you probably will never turn blue, you will never develop Argyria. But yeah, the reason this product is safe, non-GMO certified, blah 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 blah, is the same reason it won't do anything. It's basically water. So while there is evidence for the medicinal use of silver in some very specific settings, there is close to zero science backing any of the claims made on behalf of colloidal silver. Now, given the millions of people apparently using the stuff, that's probably a highly controversial statement. It's not just me, some random stranger on the internet harshing the sweet colloidal silver buzz out there. In 1999, the FDA ruled that colloidal silver was at best useless and could no longer be prescribed or sold over the counter, relegating it to that murky world of health supplements. As a result, no company in the USA can make any specific claims about colloidal silver curing disease or any specific health benefits. And, some of you out there might be like, what does the FDA know? And I love and appreciate your skepticism, please hold on to it. But do note that none of the many colloidal silver companies, with their claims of owning state-of-the-art laboratories and the top quality testing and research facilities that go along with it, have ever been able to present evidence to successfully overturn the FDA's 22-year-old ruling. None of this seems to have dented colloidal silver's popularity. All of this information for and against it is freely available online. So, what gives? I'm speculating here, complete speculation, but it seems that while some people simply appear to be desperate to be healed, many others put out a vibe that is kind of like, if I can call it, conspiracy driven, and they're embracing a medicine that they perceive to be both natural and beyond the control of Big Pharma and their FDA stooges. Now, while I empathize, I don't know what I would do or what I would believe if I was sick and desperate. And I do kind of empathize with the conspiracy guys, because we do live in a world where baby powder is linked to ovarian cancer. It remains just a little funny to me that you can consider silver natural. I mean, this stuff doesn't grow on trees. It's a heavy metal that goes through industrial smelting, for God's sakes. And if I'm meant to mistrust Big Pharma and the FDA, why the hell would I trust big colloidal silver? I mean, here's a fun fact. The guy behind many of the biggest colloidal silver companies is a multi-millionaire former airline executive, and he started his silver operation because after his airline went bust, he had what looks like a midlife crisis and became a new age hippie and decided that he wanted to clean his pool with something other than chlorine. The latest information I can find on the dude places him on the remote island of Vanuatu, where he is building what I can only describe as a doomsday cult. Link in the description to this article. And like, I personally wouldn't place my trust in this guy over, say, a big pharma executive, but you know, to each his own. Anyway, that's all happening in the background, and then along came the pandemic, 2020, which only exacerbated the whole mistrust of big government, you know, and big business, and poured steroids onto the politicization of science and medicine and all that other jazz. During the early days of the pandemic, many individuals and several companies began touting colloidal silver as a means of preventing the COVID infection. Alex Jones, God bless him, was probably the most prominent case. His company was wrapped over the knuckles by the FDA in 2020 for promoting its own silver products range, including a silver toothpaste, as being effective against COVID, with little to no evidence. In response to that controversy, Whole Foods reportedly pulled colloidal silver supplements from their shelves, but you may have noticed that you can still get it on Amazon. Oh, Jeffrey. But before any of you get on your high horse, it's not just the kookier libertarians and conservatives buying into colloidal silver. Gwyneth Paltrow's hippie wellness brand Goop, for example, stocks it along with a host of other weird stuff. And I think we can agree that Goop is not exactly a hotbed of conservative or libertarian values. Just going to show that there's no part of any political spectrum that has a monopoly on quackery or conspiracy. For most of his life as a blue person, and probably before, Karson reportedly had trouble finding work. In the interviews, he blamed this on the world's prejudice against blue skin. Despite his Oprah show level of fame and the release of Avatar, his financial situation failed to improve. He sadly ended up homeless in the years after the economic crisis in 2008-09, and the time between 2009 and 2011 was a real rough patch for him. His relationship ended and he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The disease was not related to his skin condition. He survived the cancer, but the treatments left him unable to work the jobs he was able to get. Now destitute and with his 15 minutes of fame mostly over, he moved back to his hometown where he lived in a homeless shelter for a time. Eventually reconnecting with a school classmate, he wooed her too, this time in person. He then left the shelter and moved in with her, and they were married. Unfortunately, this relationship was short-lived, as they had become estranged, reportedly by the end of 2012. Karason's story then ends in 2013. In September of that year, he suffered a heart attack, again unrelated to his Argyria, and died of complications soon after. He was 62 years old. And there you have it. That's everything I learned about blue people, Paul Karason, and colloidal silver. Questions for you, the audience. 1. Was Karson just completely crazy, or could you see yourself ending up in his shoes? Which, given his wardrobe choices, were likely blue suede. I know that if I were in enough pain, I might risk trying something, shall we say, unconventional, even if it had the chance of turning me into a Smurf. How about you? 2. I think it's clear that I'm a little bit skeptical of colloidal silver, but what about you guys out there? Are you like Madison? Do you have a colloidal silver success story or know anyone who uses the stuff? What have the effects been? Love to hear from you. And yeah, as always, housekeeping. If I got anything terribly wrong, please let me know. Point out any white lies. Looking forward to hearing from you guys. And please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.